There are fears Sydney's coronavirus outbreak could have spread to regional New South Wales after a man travelled through the state's west while unknowingly infectious. Broken Hill, Orange and Nyngan are on high alert, and testing is ramping up after an 18-year-old Sydney-sider on a camping trip visited the towns before testing positive. The case has prompted a government warning for all Sydney-siders to stay away from regional and rural areas until the latest outbreaks are under control.
Meanwhile, in Victoria, the number of venues listed as exposure sites continues to grow as the government reconsiders whether Victorians should return to offices as planned next week. For the latest, I'm joined now by reporters Ruby Cornish in Sydney, Joanna Woodburn in Orange and Elias Clure in Melbourne. Good morning to all of you. Ruby, let's start in Sydney. This Western Sydney cluster, it continues to grow. What can you tell us about the situation there?
Good morning, Isk. That's right. So in the last reporting period, we heard about 4 locally acquired cases of COVID-19. Now, 2 of those we already knew about. We heard about them yesterday morning. They are a man and a woman, both in their 40s, from the Baralla cluster. A third person announced yesterday is someone who attended the Baralla Woolworths. Now, authorities say that is very likely linked to the Baralla cluster, but there are still investigations happening there. The 4th person is someone linked to the Croydon cluster. They're a close contact of a confirmed case, and they were already in isolation. Now, testing, so that brings the Croydon cluster up to 10 cases and the Baralla cluster up to 15 cases. So testing numbers have ramped up a little bit. We had in the last reporting period just over 26,500 people come forward for tests. But New South Wales Acting Premier John Barilaro says he wants those numbers even higher, especially here in Western Sydney. Now, as you can see, this testing clinic at Marylands is just starting to pick up. It's just opened at 8 o'clock. We've had a few dozen cars through here already. But in response to this call for bigger testing, we've got more clinics opening up here in Western Sydney. So today there's a new clinic opening at Lidcombe at a university campus, and we also have that pop-up clinic at Baralla opening up. That's in response to locals saying that they were finding it difficult to access testing. They may not have had a vehicle and they weren't very comfortable hopping on public transport, Isk.
And Joanna, you're in Orange. An 18-year-old travelled from Sydney through the state's west. Where did he go and what were the risks?
Good morning, Isk. Well, the man from Sydney travelled from Broken Hill in the state's far west to Nyngan, which is in central New South Wales, and onto Orange here on his way back to Sydney. 5 locations in those 3 towns have been identified as exposure sites. So a cafe in Broken Hill, a caravan park in Nyngan and 2 petrol stations in those towns, as well as a bar here in Orange. The cafe in Broken Hill and the bar in Orange have been identified as close contacts. So anybody who was in those venues during the times that the man was are considered to be close contacts and have been told to get tested immediately and isolate for the full 14 days. Local health bosses have spoken this morning and said that there is a likelihood that a case could be discovered in the Western Local Health District, Western New South Wales, and that would likely be known by mid-next week based on incubation periods. But they have said that the risk of further transmission is low because the alert was issued so quickly and any possible close contact should already be in isolation.
So, Joanna, how's the community reacting to this?
They've responded quite well. People have come out to get tested. So we saw yesterday long lines at this testing clinic, which is at the showground in Orange. They're just getting set up, about to start. There are already cars queued outside the shed, ready to get tested. So there has been a good response. People have heeded the call of health bosses to come and get tested. But people are remaining quite calm. It's been a long time since there was a positive case in Western New South Wales, more than 140 days. But people are remaining vigilant because there is the chance, given this man has travelled through the area, and we do have a lot of tourists at this time of year, more so than usual because of the border restrictions and the lack of international travel.
Elias, you're in Melbourne. The Victorian government, it's reconsidering whether Victorians should return to work right now.
It is, Isk. So, as we know, most Victorians have been working from home since March, but the plan was that the city's biggest employer, the public service, would have 25% of its workforce return to the office as of next Monday and 50% by February the 8th. And for the commercial workforce, it was set to be 50% as of next Monday. But in light of this outbreak on the Bayside suburbs, the government is now reviewing that. And as you mentioned, there's dozens of exposure sites across Victoria, which is, I guess, preventing the government from giving the green light to these employers.
And what's the latest with exposure sites and cases in Victoria?
Well, there's almost 100 now, Isk, including the Nike store in South Melbourne. Anyone who visited there on the 30th of December between 12 o'clock and 12:45 has been asked to self-isolate for 14 days. The same goes for a Sikh temple in Keysborough. Anyone who was there on New Year's Day from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock must self-isolate for 14 days. And anyone who went to the IKEA restaurant from the 30th of December from 5:30 to 6:30 has also been asked to quarantine for 2 weeks. They'll be rueing that decision to buy that Swedish meatball. Meanwhile, the state's quarantine boss, Police Minister Lisa Neville, has urged other states to follow Victoria's lead in the strict protocols imposed on flight attendants and flight crews around testing and quarantining. She says 8 of 1,000 have tested positive to coronavirus, which she says is a concern as it's overrepresentative. Let's have a listen.
I would be today saying to the other states, this is such a high risk for all of us, for the country. Everyone needs to follow the lead around quarantining and testing of flight crew. It is absolutely critical given the numbers that we are seeing.
That's Victoria's Police Minister Lisa Neville, Elias Clure in Melbourne, Joanna Woodburn in Orange and Ruby Cornish in Sydney. Thank you to all of you.
A woman has been caught by police after escaping from the Howard Springs quarantine facility near Darwin yesterday afternoon. NT police say the 33-year-old woman was from Victoria but arrived in the NT from a hotspot 2 days ago. Officers located and returned the woman within 15 minutes of her escape.
Western Australia has detected the new UK variant of COVID-19 in 3 returned travellers who have since recovered. It's the first time the mutated strain has been detected in WA. All 3 have been released from hotel quarantine after recovering from the virus.
Qantas has brought forward international ticket sales by 2 months amid expectations global travel will resume sooner than expected. The airline previously suspended flights to the US and UK until October, but is now taking bookings from the 1st of July. However, flights to destinations like Hong Kong, Japan and Singapore have been pushed back from March to July to provide more time for safe travel bubbles to be created. But if you're thinking of booking a ticket, the government warns it is still yet to decide when international travel will resume.
The UK government says 1 person in every 50 now has coronavirus in England as a tough new national lockdown comes into force. Germany is extending its national lockdown until the end of the month and introducing tougher restrictions to control surging virus numbers. Elsewhere overseas, Indonesia's president will receive the country's first vaccine shot next week as it confronts nearly 800,000 cases. And Japan's top-ranked sumo wrestler has tested positive for coronavirus as the country considers declaring a state of emergency in and around Tokyo.